I'm also going to try and record this, and that way we can replay it as well. So, okay, so here we go. I'm going to get going. First, just quick agenda. This is what we're going to try and get through tonight as best we can. And I can already see a typo. So we got introductions. We're going to have some introduction to who's who, just so everybody's familiar with who they're going to work with, and then who they need to ask questions of if they have questions as the season goes on, and what they can expect. Go through coaching requirements. You know, this year, just like every other year, it seems like there's changes, and we're always kind of hitting a moving target. But we're going to walk through that, and that's where if people have questions, they can send them to me. Kind of got the do's and don'ts of coaching, just a couple of pet peeves we have around the association. We're going to need a little bit, probably the first time that we've talked about this as association, get into hockey diversity, kind of what that means for us and what Omega is going to try and do going forward. Get into our coaching development. Matt Martin is going to go into that, and he's going to talk about the 5 C's of coaching. We got a few videos from Jeff Blashill, the coach of the Detroit Red Wings. And then I didn't add on here, we have a little bit of off-ice stuff. We have some information coming from our COVID team, and then we'll wrap it up here with the 11 for Jacob Movement Awards and Scholastic Achievement Awards. So our introductions here. So on the girls' side, we have Chad Winicky, and he's kind of the go-to for everything there. On the boys' side, we have Colin Steen. At each level, we have skills directors, so it's a slightly different on the boys from the girls. Boys have typically one more person at each level. But the Bantam director is Brian LaFleur. Pee Wee director is Rich Dean. Squirt director is Brett Kaywood. Girls at U15 is Jeff Allen. U12 is Mike Hewler. And U10 is Lisa Albers. And then with the boys, we have skills directors. So Tyler Martin is our Bantam skills director. Jay Peccanato is our Pee Wee skills director. And Eric Kukkonen is our Squirt school skills director. Excuse me. A lot of the people involved in helping make this whole process work at the traveling level. And then Matt Margano is our ACE coordinator. Handles just about a little bit of everything. He'll be putting together a lot of the skills curriculum. The whole skills team kind of reports back to Matt, and that includes myself. I'm the coach director and help out a fair amount on the skills side here as well. Just put this up here real quick for you. So if you have questions, feel free to text. We can put them in the chat. And then if one of you guys, Brett, Chuck, or Chad, maybe let me know as you guys see things come through, and we can get them that way too. So either way, we should be able to get that stuff. Admitting a couple more people as we keep going. So first and foremost, I'm going to start out with the coaching requirements, right? So I have them in bold. The first 2 things everybody needs to do if you haven't done them already. And I've looked at our registration, and we still have a lot of people who haven't registered as coaches. We need you to get out and register on USA Hockey. That gets you your USA Hockey number. Most people are aware of that. We've been doing that for a while. But when you do your USA Hockey registration and you do your Omega registration, our registrars can follow you and can follow your progress, and they can basically keep track of everything you've done, so that we don't need to be sending stuff back and forth about what where you're at with your completion. They know. Okay. So 2 very important things. Don't forget the Omega registration. That happens a lot. So CEP, and I'll go back to this slide in just a little bit, but CEP, right? So this is the big one. This is the one that we go to a clinic, right? We do Brooklyn Park, we do Blaine, all these other places. It used to be, so I want to be clear on this. It used to be that, your levels corresponded with the level of hockey you were working, right? Well, that's not the case anymore, right? So you have to progress every year with USA Hockey on your levels. With the exception, there's just a few of them, right? So I got a lot of questions about a lot of the coaches coming out of U8s and Supermites. So if you're at a level 1, technically speaking, you are supposed to then, as you come out, you are supposed to move on to level 2. This year, we do have some exceptions, and that's the COVID card that you can see listed there. So the COVID card has changed a little bit over the summer. They had a couple deadlines on it. Now it appears as though it's going to be open. I recommend to anybody, if you're questioning where you're at, I recommend that you sign up for it, you get it. This just basically gives you a free pass on the year for your CEP. So as long as you were, you were eligible last year, it'll make you eligible this year, and you pick up right where you left off next year. Okay. The other exceptions are level 3. So once you get to level 3, you do not always have to move on. There are a couple renewal tracks. And I say that, and it goes with this next part on level 4 and level 5 too. It appears as though in some of the grumblings I've heard, and I don't know if anybody can speak to it, but we do hear that there may be some changes coming with those certifications. So if you have the opportunity to do it this year, we know what this year looks like. USA Hockey is normally pretty good about grandfathering people in. So if you're comfortable taking one this year, you have the availability, and you like to do it online, we recommend that you do it this year. Level 4, in the past, once you've got to level 4, you were set, right? So you've been set for however long, right? Or for forever. What we've heard is potentially in 2021, after this year's over, that they may change that and they may actually make you progress past that. But we've also heard that you'd be grandfathered in. And I heard somebody there, was that a comment on this, or was that just on accident?
No, my daughter walked in and I was not on mute, but no,
So again, and those are just rumors. I can't speak to the validity of it, but if you have the opportunity to do it, and you can get online, and this is the one thing I've heard a lot of people reach out to me and just say, hey, we can't get into a Minnesota virtual class. You can take a USA Hockey class anywhere, right? So you don't have to stick in Minnesota. Seems like the eastern areas have been having more virtual things available than what we've had around here. So something to look for. And again, all of this, USA Hockey, even though they change things often, it feels like, they do a really nice job of spelling things out online. So I recommend you go out there. The website's there. You go into coaching, you go into the rules. So back to this page, we got our age specific, and maybe I'll even pause real quick. Do we have any questions around the CEP before I move on? Because this always seems to be some of the most questions I get. All good? Okay, we'll keep moving. And I do have some people texting me that they're not able to get in. That might be difficult with some of our presenters, so we'll see how that goes here as we move on. Okay. Background check. Background check is one of these things that has changed as well.
Hey, Andy, just one comment from Mr. Margano. Says it's not a rumor on the changes coming for next year. All defined, see USA Hockey for details. So it sounds like those changes are coming.
They are coming. So if people, yep. So again, if you get a chance to do it this year and you can progress, we know what it looks like. I recommend you do it this year just to make sure that you're progressing, and maybe you'll get grandfathered in if that's what it looks like, right? So background check, who needs it, right? Coaches, board members, any employees of the association, volunteers. So basically everybody that's going to be a locker room dad, locker room mom, be at the rinks for these things. Anybody who has regular contact or authority over our athletes is required to have a background check, okay? Moving forward, it's going to be valid for 2 seasons. We switched to a national vendor, and it's going to track all this stuff. And if you see down at the bottom here, if you had your background check after April 1st in 2019, you would be fined for this year. If you had your last background check before April 1st of 2019, you would need to sign up for the new system. Fair enough? Our safe sport. There's no cost. There's a new program released last year. You get a certificate. While I think it's great for you to save a copy of it just in case there's any mix-up, we do not need you to send that copy to us unless, again, there is a mix-up. It's going to be required every year. And with the new program, you start with the full course, and then you move on with the refresher course every year. Down below, I put a little information here. If you go out to Safe Sport, if you want to do this with any of your athletes, any of the kids, I do not think this would be a bad idea. It has to be permitted by an adult to allow the kids to do it. But this gives you the chance for kids to participate in a Safe Sport training class as well. Age modules and concussion. So age modules, as you progress, this is the thing that progresses with the level of your kid that you're coaching, right? So you need to complete each module for this prior to participating with your team or being placed on the roster, okay? Again, once you're registered with Omega and USA Hockey, we'll be able to track you if you've had that done. For concussion training, we need a current certificate from last year. The new age modules include concussion training in them. So moving forward, we should be good. If you have any questions, any concerns, this was the one in the past that we actually needed you to send us a certificate on. If you're one of those people right now that still needs it, check the website. It'll tell you where to send it, how to get it to them, all that stuff. Okay. Reimbursement for your classes, your registrations, everything else. You can see what we reimburse for: USA Hockey fees, CEP course fees, age modules, background checks. Also on the apparel side, we'll pay for you to have jacket and pants from the Letterman selection, and we'll do this once every 3 years. But keep in mind, there's only a max of 4 per team. You can do this. All that information on how you get reimbursed, it's too much to put in here, but all that information is listed online. Look under the coaches tab. Jumping into our do's and don'ts. I'm going to start with a couple don'ts. This is a big thing for me. It's a big thing for our association. We're here to develop the kids, right? If we win one more trophy or one less trophy, while at times that can help with development, we're not trying to shorten the bench. We're not trying to, if we have 14 skaters, we're not doing 10 forwards and 4D because those 4 players are our best, right? Wear jeans on the ice. We have plenty of hockey apparel. We like to look good. We don't need to be wearing our jeans. I know some people come right from work. Hey, I get it. If you got to do it, you do it. Let's just try and let's act the part as best we can. Another don't. This is kind of a big request too. We have a lot of great coaches. We have a lot of great enthusiastic parents. Make sure when you're a coach on a team, you're not only just coaching your kid, right? We have a whole team. Let's make sure we're paying that same attention to every one of the kids. Sometimes it's one of these great things that I know I've talked with some of my assistants in the past, that we make sure that the other parents on the team, the other coaches can specifically reach out to our kids on the ice and talk to them sometimes, so they don't just get stuck coming to us or just hearing from us, right? Kind of help each other out, especially if your assistant coaches, kid is having a tough night. We need to jump in and help each other out. We don't need to just be parents on the ice. We have our job as coaches. Please don't wait until December 31st to look into the coaching requirements, right? Every year this gets a couple people hung up. Your managers will get communications from our registrars on where you're at. Please take a look at that. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out, right? Our registrars, they know way more about this than I do on what's required and when and what's needed. Reach out to any of us if you have questions, and check the list. Right now, if you go out to the Omega Coaches tab, you'll see a list. If you've registered, you're listed there. It'll tell you what you've completed, what you're good with, and what you need to get taken care of. We don't want to be yelling at the officials. Matt or Chuck maybe could even speak to this. I don't remember the stat or the number of how many officials quit every year at District 3. We need the officials. We need the coaches. We need the players. Officials need us. We need each other to work in this environment. He's talked about some of these kids, how young they can be. And I don't remember the youngest age we allow them to referee. I can't off the top of my head, but when you think about our sons and daughters being 14, 15, 16 years old and going to their first job and getting screamed at, it's not their fault, right? They're learning too. It's part of the progression. It's part of the development. So let's do our best as an association. And we don't really have much tolerance for that, right? If we hear about official abuse, we deal with it pretty swiftly. Our dues, all the positive things we can do out there. Let's give every player a chance to succeed and fail in different situations, right? Our kids are going to fail, and we know it, and it's okay, right? They're going to learn, and they're going to learn what they can do next time. And it's that adversity and some of the best things that they can learn while they play. And we also have to give them the chance to succeed, right? And that goes back to that shortening of the bench. We need every player that opportunity so that they can be on the penalty kill late in the game. They can be on the important face-off in the D zone or the offensive zone. I think it's great to set team goals and maybe even some themes, right? So some themes. We send out the hockey habits, and I know some coaches have used that, or there's some other, kind of their team mantra, and they stick with it. Some teams get them on the back of their practice jersey or on their sweatshirts or whatever the case may be. But set some common themes, some common goals, so that by the end of the year, these kids can recite them and they buy in, and we get some, get some kids working together and the team working together toward a common theme. Let's do our best We're an incredible association, right? We have incredible coaching. We have incredible players. I think there's a lot of people that love their kids to play where we play. I know everybody has their favorite stuff from the summer, some AAA stuff. Let's do our best when we can, when we're going to our practices, our games. Let's do our best to represent our association, kind of build a little bit of a brand on who we are. Big thing, and we'll talk about in the videos, and Matt will even get into this. Let's prepare for our practices. And I think this year is even more important than others. Lots of times in the past, the coaches would have enough time in the locker room before to kind of go over a few more things. So if you weren't prepared, you could make up for it quickly. We're going to have to be prepared this year, right? We're not going to have the time to sit around to chat about what the practice plan is going to look like, or maybe add and subtract some drills. Let's be prepared as coaches. If you're an assistant coach, let's ask ahead of time, what's our responsibilities for tonight, right? Where's the practice plan? Head coaches, let's get those plans out, and we have some resources to help you with that. And there you go. Use our resources. We spend a fair amount of money. We spend a fair amount of time putting some things together. I know at times it can almost be overwhelming because it's tough to find some things, or you get hit with so many different emails from us. But try and focus on a couple of those resources, right? Make it your goal that you're going to grab a couple this year, whether you use Huddle more, or you use all the Hockey Habit emails, or you're using some of the practice plans that Margano or Colin Steen or one of these guys has put together. Please, please, please do your best to follow COVID guidelines, right? The guidelines are in there for us to, so we can have a successful season, so that everybody can play. And if we have an outbreak or we have something happen on a team, we don't have to worry about the entire team going down, right? If we follow these guidelines, we should be able to continue, the season in the best possible manner. Really, really big pet peeve, and Matt Margano knows why. But please close all your bench doors for practice, right? I mean, most teams, we have multiple assistant coaches. We don't need doors open. We don't need kids falling out. We don't need guys getting the turnbuckle. Let's close all of our bench doors. This one, we were thinking about doing a video this year. I know it's really dumb, but let's keep snow off the fresh ice when we're putting the nets away. Tilt the nets. Make sure you're not dragging a mound of snow. Team after you is not going to be happy. We're going to be talking about this a bit more. And I mentioned earlier, we're going to be promoting diversity and inclusion in Omega. Adam Reiter's put together some good things, and he's taken it upon himself to really lead the charge as an association in the state, that we're going to do our absolute best, to promote diversity and inclusion. Speaking to that, Adam, are you on?
I am on.
Thanks, Adam.
All right. Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Andy, for kicking off the meeting and giving me my portion of it. I want to start by thanking all the coaches and everyone on this call for your commitment to Omega. We view our coaches as our biggest asset. As a board, we talk about how to help our coaches, equip our coaches as our number one topic. And know that we support you, and we are here to give you the resources that you need to have an enjoyable experience. And so just please continue to keep that front of mind as you go through Omega, as we're here for you to answer your questions, and know that we appreciate you. We thank you for your time and your leadership and for what you bring. When it comes to diversity, this is something that I'm very passionate about. And I'm not going to get into it too deep tonight, but it is an initiative that is coming from USA Hockey and Minnesota Hockey. I serve on committees on both of those levels around diversity, inclusion, and improving that in our sport. I don't know how many of you saw the statement that we put out today to our members, but Omega stands against racism. And that is something that we stand firmly on as a culture and as an environment for our players. And when we approach this season, we want to make sure that we made that very clear to our members. We're going to take a zero tolerance approach this year. So as coaches, if you observe racist behavior by an Omega player or member or another team, address it and escalate it to a level director immediately. we were able to hear a story about JT Brown. I follow him, and he's actually was coached by a friend of mine. And when he was a Pee Wee player, he was playing in a game, and the other team was using derogatory comments towards him, and he brought it to his coach, and I don't know the details if the ref heard it or not, and his coach demanded that be called or that the matter be handled during that game. The refs refused to do anything, and he picked up his team and walked off the ice. And JT Brown said, "That's when I knew that I had a coach that had my back. That's when I knew I was on a team that I was included in." And that story was moving to me as one that creates the type of environment we should have in our sport and our association, and one that has spurred a lot of our discussion as thought as we move forward as an organization. There will be accountability for players and parents' behavior on and off the ice, including social media this year. Now, I'm not going to get into the details, and we are still having discussions about what this looks like, but it's simply, we don't have a tolerance for any type of racist behavior in our association, our players and our coaches. I ask for your help with that. As I stated before, if you see anything, hear anything, have ideas to contribute to this initiative, it is appreciated. We have included language in our code of conduct that should help us with that. Omega expects coaches to build an inclusive culture where all players feel supported and part of the team. I've spent time interviewing families with diverse players over the last few months. And the number one topic that they bring up why they either left hockey or feel not included in hockey is why the sport isn't as fun for them. I'm not going to lay out a bunch of initiatives and things that everyone should be doing. I'm merely trying to bring awareness of when you are a non-white player on a hockey team, you feel different. And we have to do our part to ensure that we build an inclusive culture where players feel supported, they feel like they have allies, and feel included as part of the team. I'm not here saying that I think that there is overt racism going on in Omega. That's the last thing I'm saying. I'm just raising awareness of how non-white players have shared with me how they feel in the sport. And I use that JT Brown example as he's spoken to, as he's told his stories. Last bullet point I'd say is please educate yourself on how you can build an inclusive culture. Look for 2 to 3 links or look for ways in which you do that. I've spent time educating myself on this topic. And there's a wide range of things we can do. And I ask that you do whatever you're comfortable with, but spend some time on how you can build an inclusive culture and fight racism in hockey. Again, I think the overt stuff is the easy stuff. I hope that everyone in this understands that that is acceptable, but there are other things we can learn and there are other things we can do to support diversity and inclusion in Omega.
Thanks, Adam.
Got any?
Hey, yeah, I might just want to touch on, I mean, maybe you did on that. Know who to go.
Matt, we have put together move our to move forward in this area, and there'll be more to come. We had different that we made presentation and some would be good for that role. Now, I'm very comfortable.
And just one other thing, I believe people are quiet and they don't want to touch this topic. And I think we have to change that approach, that we have to be open about this topic and have conversations, right? And learn from each other. And so, I mean, just my message to the coaches is like, yeah, it's a tough conversation. It's a tough topic, but let's start with those conversations so that we can get feelings and opinions and thoughts out there so we can make ourselves all better.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think I'll share one story. When I interviewed a family, and they had a player that wanted to play hockey, and they knew nothing about hockey. They didn't even know how to put on the equipment. They didn't know how to do anything. Father was a former Division I athlete. Mom was also very athletic, and they love sports, and they had a lot of positive things to say about Omega. The one thing that they said was, I would have loved to learn to be involved, how to get involved and find some role. I know I can't be on the ice coaching. I know I'm not going to improve a hockey player, but I would have loved to have found a way to be involved in my son's teams growing up. And I think that's just something to think about is for many families, this is a first time in hockey, and the culture or the sport is intimidating. You have a lot of coaches that like on this call that know so much about hockey, and they move so fast. And for these families, it's overwhelming. So anything you ways to be involved or sport and make it full and easy as a house law. Are stepping on the ice for the first time, and it's a new environment, and they feel intimidated and overwhelmed by it. So anything we can do to slow down, educate, help our non-white families would be appreciated.
And just one thing more to add on to it, it is a race, but it's also a gender discussion as well, right? Yeah. And Andy on our new strategy into this is one of our initiatives we've started discussions around and starting just to look into.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And my internet, I don't know if it's mine or not, but if I end up getting too choppy, you guys let me know and I can flip through the slides and one of you guys can talk for me. But yeah, to that point about the gender as well, we're doing our best, and we're ideally, how Adam and I have talked about is we want to be a model organization, not just for our girls program, but we want to be a model organization for our girls coaches. And we really would like to do whatever we can to bring back females who've been a part of the association in the past, players, and anybody who has that kind of experience who could help us out. I think we owe it to our families. I think there's a lot that we can learn. I think there's a lot that our sons and daughters can learn by seeing another gender out there a little bit more than we currently are. And Adam brought one thing up and he was talking about it for the diverse families, but I'd also extend this to everybody that if you want to be involved, it doesn't have to be coaching, but we have a lot of things that we're doing in a lot of different areas that we need to help organizationally. So many different tasks that we just need some passionate people to make sure that our association continues in the trajectory that we're on now, especially some of these families that are coming out of U8s and supermites. We definitely need some of those families to help carry the torch as some of the other individuals, will be leaving Omega over the next couple of years. So, and we will continue on. Matt, can you hear me? Are you able to see the screen? This is where you get to jump in.
Yes, sir. All right. Thanks, Andy. Quick introductions. My name's Matt Margano. I've been part of the association since my oldest was a mini mite. So that he's now a sophomore in high school. So I've been in leadership roles, coach roles, parent roles, right? So, and now my role is just kind of leading the skills area of hockey development amongst Omega. And so the first slide here, what are Omega development priorities? We kind of put it in a few buckets, right? And this is why we have success, is that we talk around and strategize around player development. We organize and strategize around resources and organizations. So what that means is that we make sure we get the resources to the coaches. But in addition, we make sure we have roles defined so we have people in those places so we can guide everyone through this journey. And lastly, what we want to talk mostly about with this audience is coaching development. And really, this is what I've learned is behind every good association or team and player, you must have a good coach. That I truly do believe. I bring up the Watada example last year. Watada is a local association that had good coach, had a superior coach, right? And even to the point where he had a group of kids that half the team went to Benilde and the other half stayed at Wayzata and they still won a state tournament. And so, but that coach had to leave. And when he left, he let go. And there was no legacy, or the legacy wasn't there. And now they are starting over and they're trying to play a little bit of catch up. And we want to prevent that situation. So we want to make sure that everyone is a good coach, and that when we define a good coach or when we have a good coach, that our association is going to be better for it, the teams are going to be better for it, and the players are going to be better for it. Moving on. Oh, okay. So is that going to play? We talked a little bit about this last year. So some of this is repeats from last year. We talk about the 5 C's. So coaching excellence, we talk 5 C's. And the first one, we talk about being committed. When I talk about being committed, a good example of that is just making sure you do practice plans. And if you have a chance, this USA Hockey webinar, Jeff Blashill is really good. And we'll just let it play. Listen.
Yeah, and let me know if you guys can hear it, but I'll click and we'll try this out.
Can't hear it, Andy.
Yeah, you will lose your players' focus if it
Now we can.
one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. You can't, at our level, you can never waste their time ever. And I'm super adamant about that. Our coaches, our assistant coaches have to know exactly what's going on. They know exactly where the pucks are moved from one drill to the next. I never say, hey, put the pucks over here and you put the pucks there. That's already done before. We've already planned that out. It's way harder at certain youth levels, and I get that for sure. But anything you can do as a coach to make sure that your staff knows exactly what they're doing. I pre-draw most of my drills before I go on the ice. So I've got 3 boards that are on the bench. I just pick the board up and I show it to them instead of stand at the board and draw with my back to them and try to talk. So I pre-draw those, boom, it's here. I tell them exactly at the beginning of practice what we're trying to get out of that practice. And usually my focus is narrow. This is our main focus of practice. We're getting better at angling. We're getting better at breakout habits. We're getting better, whatever that is. We're also going to do a little of this, but this is what our focus is. So I tell them that at the beginning of practice, and I tell them before every drill what the focus is, why we're doing it. We play a 2-on-2 angle game cross ice all the time, and you just have your little key words that are that is part of your verbiage as your hockey team. So it might be, for us, it's stop on puck, stop on people, make sure we take away good ice, force the bad ice when we play that angle game. So I'll just give them those reminders as we're going in that game of exactly what we're trying to get done. And that verbiage is really important, that you use the same verbiage over and over, and all your coaches do. So when you say to them, pre-bump, they know what pre-bump means. Pre-bump means make contact with the opponent before the puck comes to you. All our guys know that, our coaches know that, and now we're using the same verbiage.
So the biggest point around that is, he brings up a lot of good points, right? And we can touch on those other ones later. But the one that, that this is the coach for an NHL team, and they're all professionals, right? But he still is committed to the team. He's prepared. And, that's just, it's really good to hear that from a different source, right? To move on here. So the first one is committed. Example of that is practice plans. Character. So character is, again, teaching kids to be good. We're not going to yell at refs. One thing, off the COVID discussion, we're going to wear our mask on the bench at games, right? That's what we're required to do. I don't want to see a picture. I don't want to walk into Maple Grove West and see one of our coaches with the mask off. That's just not teaching our kids what we're supposed to be doing right now. And if the kid sees it, then they think it's all right. Going back to the diversity and inclusion topic, Wes Bolin spoke to how powerful his messaging is at the high school level, that these kids, you have these kids here. And as a coach, you can, tell the right message, and they're listening. It's not a long period of time that they have to listen, but the message that you do tell, they are listening. And it's important that we say the right things. And, West's point was at the high school level, it's even more important because they're very influential at that point. And, we don't have to set our own agendas and whatnot, but we just have to say the right things to teach the kids the good things. This is the question, right? Caring, the one question or the one answer that came back from the NCAA and the NHL, what do they want from their coach mostly? And the answer is caring. They want to be liked by their coach. That goes a long way. And so, examples of that is just having a simple conversation with them. The JT Brown story is probably the platinum level caring story that you'll ever hear. Right? That kid felt like coach has got his back and he cares about him. You have a kid that that buys into that shows that you care. They're gonna play really hard for you. And so not only is it just the right thing to do, but it's kind of an advantage from a team perspective to get the most out of these kids as much as possible. So just do those things that show that you care. Captivating. This is the fun and game part of it, right? And so go there and have fun. It's a little different in my experience when you're at the house level, when you're rolling around on the ice versus when you're older and you're in the Pee-wees or Bantam level or the U10 or U12, U15. The games are defined a little bit differently, but be open about having games. Kids love to play games. So if it's captivating and it's fun, they're going to want to come back. And then lastly is communication. And so, it's communication is important, obviously. But communication is a two-way road, right? And so it's not only what you're saying, but it's what they're saying, and that you're actually listening. But you're also communicating clear expectations. So these are just like the 5 C's. As a coach, if you just want to focus on small aspects of each one, write them down. Have a strategy moving forward in the year. And trying to I think you're going to have success. And so. There's any questions on that you can ask, but for right now, I'll move on to the next slide here. So yeah, I think we got some more.
9-year-old range. How would you want to, if you were coaching them, or how would you want to try to instill those habits in those youth players as a coach?
Number one thing is create an environment that's gonna increase the kids' passion. That's the number one thing. If kids have passion for the game, they are going to work to get better at it, no matter what it is. If my youngest loves to sing, that's what he loves to do is sing. So that's what he does all the time. He sings ad nauseum to his parents and his sister and brother, but that's what he loves. If kids love hockey, if they love going to the rink, if they then take that love and they take it home with them, because you've increased their passion as a youth coach. That's the number one thing by a country mile. How do you do that? The word fun gets put out there lots, but there's reality. You have to enjoy what you're doing. And so, like, if kids go to the rink and they don't want to practice because it's not fun, that's no good. They have to enjoy it. They got to have fun. But the other thing, and sometimes this is super important for the NHL coaches as it is for youth coaches, you have to make each player feel important. Kids want to do things that they're good at. That's what they want to do. Like, nobody has great passion for something they're terrible at, except maybe me in golf. Like, other than that, usually you only do what you love doing, what you're good at. So, like, not every kid's going to be the best kid on this team. And I've seen this. Like, we've had great youth coaches. My kids' youth coaches have been great people. But I've seen it where some players not that good. All of a sudden, they don't become important. All of a sudden, they know they're not important. Like, they know when nobody thinks they're any good, and they lose their passion for the game. So find a way as a coach to try to make every player feel important in some way. Give them roles. Give them something that you're going to make them feel important. And trust me, it's easier said than done. Like, I've got to remind myself to do that with my team. It's no different at a youth level.
The 9-year-old range. How would you?
So yeah, I mean, I just want to touch on, it's on YouTube. You want to look it up. There's some really good stuff there, but I think he hit it out of the park there. Right. And it kind of he touched on maybe 2 or even 3 culture or character, or the 5 C's, coaching excellences, that we want to make sure we touch on. But I want to also add our Omega coaching culture. And it's not only at the traveling level, it's a house level as well. And I think one thing that Marty's going to talk to about Dryland is this buy-in thing, right? And he talked to Roger Guerrillo, who came last year, and we got to have coaches that buy into the association culture. And what does that mean, right? And so we want to make sure all these behaviors are aligned. And I think it starts with us being a community, and that every player is valued the same. Andy talked a little bit about the do's and don'ts, and I don't think I need to elaborate on that. But it doesn't just stop there. It also is on practice. It's also with the goalies, and right. So it's also what we wear, and that we're all wearing the same thing, and that we're all Omega. And so I think it starts with being a community. If anyone has listened to Topher Scott podcast, he had, and this is just a story off being a community and collaborating. He had the Finnish national team coach in chief, right? And they talked a little bit about, how do you motivate your culture? How do you get your kids to play better? How do you get your coaches into it? And he really went back to that community approach, that everyone was on the same page, and that they were collaborative, and that everyone was included. And that was how they motivated each other. It wasn't that they yelled at each other louder. It wasn't that, they put the score. If they don't get ice cream. It was that they were a community. And that's a pretty easy answer, right? I think that's something that we're all able to do. Second here is that we train using station-based practices and small area games. I challenge the head coaches this year, 50% of your practice is a game. 50% of your practice is a game. That's my challenge to you guys. If you got a chance, I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing. Doc Rivers is on Netflix. And one thing, the first 5 minutes that I heard him talk about is that when he was a kid, someone said, "You going to practice?" And he goes, "What's practice?" He goes, "Practice." He goes, "I don't consider it practice. It's a game. It's a sport." And so, that's something that we can have control over, and that we can set that forward, right? I think we can all agree that, practice is a word that's hard, and not that we don't need practice, but we control that environment to maybe make it more game-like and to make it captivating and fun. And then lastly here, the behavior starts at the house level, but we can still provide practice plans. We still should use practice plans. Their culture is using a practice plan, and that we're organized, just like what Jeff had mentioned, that, we're not wasting any of our time. I contribute a lot of our success at the boys and girls level at high school age now, that we were efficient with the ice that we were given. Right. And so, we want to make sure to do that, continue moving forward, and starting with practice plans and being able, where are they? Well, we've got 10 that we're using right now as part of our fall camp. Use those. There's some good stuff on there. And Andy will get into all our resources here in a little bit, but that's part of our culture.
Hey, Matt, how would you rate our culture today? Are we 100%, 50%? Where do we have to improve?
That's a good question. And I can be frank with you, you're right? I think you can never be 100% because it's always a journey, right? You can never be comfortable that you're there, because I think the journey needs to always be continuous improvement. And you know, how about, is our culture changing? I would say maybe our culture is changing somewhat, and maybe it's just that I'm changing. I'm moving along with my kids, so I'm not really familiar with what is going on in other areas. But I want to reassure everyone that when I do go to the rink and what I see, and not that I'm the judge and the jury, is that we have moved light years ahead of training on the ice from, you know, even 10 years ago. 10 years ago at the house level, coaches got their ice. They went to one side of the ice. They did their stuff. The other guy did their stuff. They did Russian circles. They did the pretzel drill. They played pom. You know what I mean? And so I think that part of our culture has changed. I think our challenge right now to this team, and maybe not so much at the traveling level, but more at the house level, is the sustaining, and that we maintain it, and that we even get better. So I would say we're still grading really high, but I'm a little cautious on the sustainment part, in that we do have discussions and we're talking about, you know, how can we sustain that and make sure we have the legacy still in with the new age, the new generation. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thanks.
Chuck, what do you think our grade is?
You know, I think I share the same concerns. For those on the call, I have kids still in house all the way up through high school. You know, I think it's really getting the younger group of coaches at the house level into sports right now to continue to learn from Matt, you know, learn from others that have been there before us, because we don't want to lose it. And I would say just think about it. And a lot of the stuff talked about here, embrace it, because at the end of the day, the kids are the ones that benefit, because we're all old anyways. So we don't matter.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. So next up, we have a few different things here, and I believe the Muellers are going to talk first. Anna and Josh, are you guys on the call?
We are.
Wonderful. So I'm going to flip into your slides. I believe they're next. So this year we got a great team. They'll explain some of the things that are going to happen here, but this is Anna Mueller, and she stepped forward with Josh to be in charge of our COVID team. So.
Great. Yeah, we're on there. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna, and this is my husband, Josh. We've been with Omega for a few years. We have a first-year Bantam player and a second-year U10 player. So we're going to talk through tonight a high-level COVID preparedness plan. We don't have enough time to go through every little detail, so we're going to kind of breeze through some high-level stuff. So if people have questions, you can certainly reach out to us, and we're happy to talk through any details, questions, or concerns that you have. You can go to the next slide. These are the things we're going to kind of get through. The first thing we want to talk about is some important terms that we want people to be aware of. We're just going to cover a few of these, but all of these are something that as coaches you should be familiar with. The first is close contact. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight and throughout the season. Something you need to be familiar with and paying attention to when you're at practices and games is whether or not players and or coaches or volunteers are within 6 feet of each other for 15 minutes or more within a 48-hour period of time. So things are cumulative. So just think about that. The second is a high risk exposure. Essentially that means someone who has had that close contact within 6 feet for the period of time of the 15 minutes or more. It might be something like someone coughing in your face, sharing of water bottles, maybe they shared food. And it's really up to the discretion of MDH. So things to consider when you're at the ice. The other thing we wanted to call to your attention is what is an outbreak? An outbreak per the Minnesota Department of Health is if you have 2 or more positive players or coaches within 1 week, assuming that they're not from the same household. So if you had 2 brothers on the same team and both were positive, that wouldn't count as an outbreak. But if another teammate became positive, then that would. So it's something to consider, because when you have an outbreak, quarantine the whole team. You can go to the next slide. Wanted to tell you a little bit our team. So we have 3 different levels of team that you'll be able to interact with. If you want to go to the next slide. The first is the COVID safety That's Josh and myself. My husband's an internal medicine physician for Alina, and I'm a public health nurse and director of family health, which is a home visiting program for Hennepin Healthcare. So we've been doing COVID for a long time now, so part of our day and now our evening job as well. So what you'll expect from us is that we will work with the level leads as well as the executive board to talk through the COVID preparedness plan. We are the primary contact for a positive member, and a member would be a player, coach, parent, or volunteer that's doing something with Omega. And we are responsible performing initial contact tracing, which essentially means contacting the affected player and or coach and talking through all the possible contacts that they may have had during their infectious period. You can go to the next slide. The next level is our level lead. So we have 3 level leads, and there are 2 for the travel level, which we'll cover today. Dr. Heather Podowski is a neonatologist, and she will be our boys travel level lead. So if you have questions or concerns, you can certainly reach out to Heather. And each of the level leads has their own Omega email address. You can see on the slide there. Girls Travel is Jen Rainerson, and she's a public health nurse and lead school nurse for the Robbinsdale School District. So has been working with COVID in her day job as well. And she has her email address listed. The duties for the level lead is that they are the primary contact for questions related to COVID within their respected level. They will be communicating with teams if there has been a non-high risk exposure. They will also be communicating with specific individuals if there has been a high risk exposure and if there is a need to quarantine. And they will work with team contacts to ensure compliance with health screening and other general policies related to COVID. You can go to the next slide. And that brings up our last level, and this is where we need coach help as the seasons start. Each team throughout Omega will need to have a designated COVID team contact. We recommend that that is not a coach and likely is also not the manager. This position will require some hours, and so there will be some volunteer hours that they will get to do this work, about 5 hours through DIBS. And essentially the duties of this individual, that they will be the primary contact for families on their respective team. If there's any general questions, they'll gather those questions and bring them to the level lead. They'll communicate for clarifications, anything that the team needs. They'll assist with intermittent checks of compliance with the health screening and other policies and procedures related to COVID, as well as be responsible for assistance with team compliance throughout the season. You can go to the next slide. So what we need for you all to be aware of is what happens if you have a COVID positive player or one of the coaches becomes positive, or if there's a parent or other household member that becomes positive with COVID. We need you to alert the COVID safety officers as soon as possible, as soon as you get that positive result. Positive individuals must stay away from hockey, all hockey related activities for 10 days. Non-positive household members and close contacts also cannot participate in Omega related events for 14 days. So we won't go through all the details on that slide, but those are the biggest things to pay attention there. Couple other notes just to be aware. It's very wordy on the screen there, but what you should pay attention to is the American Academy of Pediatrics is finding that there may be some correlation with COVID and some issues with hearts afterwards. So they're worried about infection in the heart or enlargement of the heart. And so some players may come back either with restrictions from their medical provider. And as coaches, just be aware if you're watching a particular player as they return to the ice, if you notice them being excessively fatigued, or if they just aren't acting their normal pre-COVID self, to sort of pay attention to that and maybe bring that up to the parents who they might not be aware. If they're not seeing their child exert much during activity, it might be more pronounced following physical activities. So there's something to be aware of. Also, if a player at practice becomes ill or starts coughing, as the coach, you do need to step up and ask that player to leave the ice or the other team activity and go to the designated area at the arena. And someone does need to contact their parents to pick them up immediately. So as the coach, you do have the obligation to make sure you're paying attention to that. You can go to the next slide. Another thing to pay attention to is a player, coach, or other household member that has a high risk exposure to COVID, but it's not related to hockey. You still cannot participate in Omega related events for 14 days. You can go to the next slide. Health screening. If you've been around the arena lately, you've noticed big posters with QR codes and different links. That's our health screening. So the Department of Health does require that associations have some way of tracking that their members are doing regular health screenings. And so right now, that's how we are currently doing it, is through that QR code or that health screening link. It's all online. We are having a bit of issues with compliance for members actually filling it out, but that's something we're working through. Our way of tracking attendance as well as doing the health screening. So it's doing essentially two duties. One is the health screening and the second is getting an accurate attendance. And we need that accurate attendance of who's participating in what activities in case there is a positive case, so that we can perform what's called contact tracing. You can go to the next slide. Now I'm going to turn over to Josh to keep going.
All right, so just a few things on some of the other details related to COVID. So I'm going to talk about practices, games, and some of the other stuff. So for practices, some of the main things to just note that we're trying to do to decrease risk of exposure and other things is, for prior to practice, players should come fully dressed if they can. This alleviates the amount of time that they need to actually be at the rink before skating. They should really try to arrive no more than about 10 minutes before the start of activities. If you can, ice times are often about 15 minutes apart. So you need to try to have enough time for the kids to come off the ice to get out and have the new kids come on, so that there's not a lot of interaction. There's enough space for them to sit, because we can't use all the locker room space and those types of things. So really trying to limit how much time they're there ahead of time. So coming dressed saves that sort of time. So if they don't even need 10 minutes, it can be a little bit shorter. Ideally, it's just sort of they get there, they put on their skates, they hop on the ice. That would be the ideal situation. Parents and guardians are not encouraged to stay at the arena. Just less people, if parents get sick, their kids are out. They can obviously out. So we don't want it to spread within the association. We don't want the kids to get sick from their parents, those types of things. For players who are younger and need help with getting any equipment on, skate tying and stuff like that, certainly they can still help with that. We encourage them to try to only help their own kids if they can. But then as soon as they're done helping their kid, they should try to leave. Players should not bring food to eat or at the rink. Eating is one of the highest risk sort of things. Stuff, respiratory droplets get onto the food, goes right into your mouth. It can be really risky. So we really encourage them not to do that. And then really trying to adhere to social distancing rules and using their mask when they're waiting. So if they're not on the ice, they're waiting to get on, they have their skates tied and stuff, but the Zamboni's still on there, they should have their masks on. They should be socially distanced either at their spot while they're getting their stuff on, or they can stand by the boards, but they got to be 6 feet apart from each other. Next slide. During the practice itself, so per Minnesota hockey rules, no more than 50 people are allowed on the ice. For most things, that shouldn't be too challenging because most of us will just be teams, maybe 2 teams. Players, coaches should split the groups into pods of no more than 25. Generally, that will be your team. Avoid intermixing pods as much as you can. Obviously, teams can intermittently kind of practice with each other and stuff. It's just that if you're going to do anything where they can't really social distance, try not to mix the 2 different teams or pods, because otherwise that runs into issues of having to try to figure out what to do with both teams. You're going to affect a lot more people. So just if they can't social distance, try not to intermix those pods. At Velocity, the space is really limited. The association's working on the plan to sort of not have many teams there, but just be aware of that part. Coaches are encouraged to really promote and enforce the social distancing as players wait in lines and drills. So if you're having them do single player drills or 2-player drills and there's kind of the line, really try to get those kids to separate by 6 feet, just because all that time kind of accumulates as they're close together. And The actual playing of hockey is going to be generally fairly low risk stuff. It's just when they're standing, sitting around and waiting to do stuff, trying to keep them separated is best you can. Benches should not be used during practice unless you're using it as a way to also distance for something. Players should keep their gloves on at all times during the practice and stuff. They should try not to handle things with their own hands, just more risk for contact with stuff. And then coaches must be wearing masks at all times before and after practice. And it's really encouraged if you can wear it during the practice, if you're not doing a super lot of physical stuff and you feel comfortable enough to really try to wear it during practice as well, if you can. Next slide. And then after practice, the biggest thing is really trying to limit, again, sort of just like before practice, trying to limit any extra time that you have to have kids being with other kids. So really trying to limit no off-ice interaction. And then really, if they can just get their skates off, get their helmet off and head out, that's the ideal situation because you want to make sure that they're out so that the new group can come in, have a space to be without other people being there. And so we really have a lot more space that way. All right. Next slide. Other important notes with practices, kids should use the bathroom, fill their water bottles, all that stuff before they come. They should absolutely not share water sources, so the liquid containers and stuff like that. Not that people would be at this point, but they really shouldn't. Teams that don't have a designated goalie, so this will be an issue for some of the U10 teams potentially, for sharing equipment and stuff, coming up with a general plan where you really limit how often you ever have to change up the gear. And ideally it should be disinfected between any players, and trying to give 24 hours where the gear just sits so that the disinfectant wears off and isn't there for when the next player has to put it on. In general, close contact during a 1 hour practice is sort of presumed to be about 3 to 5 minutes. And so trying to limit players' time together outside of the practice is what we're trying to aim for. So not having them be really close during drills, not having them be really close before or after practice, so we can really stay pretty far away from that 15-minute time period and just really limit the risk of any spread or having to quarantine players. All right, next slide. Games and scrimmages, a lot of stuff sort of similar to the practice stuff, but a few other things. So warm-ups really should be done outside or at home. We shouldn't be doing them in the facility. And then dressing, sort of similar to practice, should be done at home or outside in their vehicle before they come back into the rink. If you can be a little bit earlier for games because we understand that you might have to go through some other things to prepare for the game. But if you do a pregame meeting, really try to conduct it in a social distanced kind of atmosphere. Everybody should be wearing their masks. Really try not to use the locker rooms because, again, that's just going to add a few more minutes together in close proximity. And then that makes the game a lot more risky as far as the amount of time that we're together. So next slide. During the game itself, a few things. So scorekeepers, ideal cases is just one person in there. So doing the clock and the scorekeeping if possible. Penalty boxes, if you don't need somebody there, don't have anybody in there. Players should try to socially distance, trying to use opposite corners in the box. So they should just be getting used to that part. Coaches, we really should try to keep no more than 2 coaches on the bench, just less people on it because there's going to be too many people there with the kids already, and the coaches have to wear masks. There shouldn't be any pregame, postgame handshakes. And then we really encourage coaches to be creative with what you do on the bench to promote ways for players to move around on the bench such that players are socially distanced, or you're always having a rotation such that people aren't near together. If that isn't possible, then at least knowing who is by each other so that if we have a positive case, we know exactly who might be a high risk exposure for that person, so we can alert them. But otherwise, if it's unknown, then we have to sort of treat everybody, and then it's harder for the whole team. Next slide. After the game, there shouldn't be any meetings. The bench time together is already a lot of time together, and families are encouraged to try to leave right away after. So if there's things you want to say, just kind of save it for the next practice and then kind of chat about it then. out of town teams and stuff, just always consider what's kind of going on in those areas in that community whenever you're going to be playing somebody that's coming from out of town. Spectators, it's really encouraged to limit the number of spectators. Just the more people we have, the more risk there is to our Omega family out there. So trying to encourage families to keep it to about 2 spectators per player for games if they can. They should come just at game time, not extra loitering and stuff like that. And they should try to leave right away after, head to their cars and just have players plan to meet them at the vehicles if they can. Next slide. Dry land, at this point, we don't recommend it inside the building. It should be done outside. They should stay distance as best they can. All team meeting things should be done virtually if you can. Safety meetings, we encourage not doing it. It is an increased risk for our Omega family in those settings, and it puts the players at risk of getting it from parents or other family. It also puts them at risk of not being able to play hockey if a parent gets sick. Pictures, we are in the process of working out a way to do team pictures and stuff. It'll be up to each team to sort of decide what they want to do with that. If they want individual, if they like to do some team things, but we're trying to figure out safe ways to do that for everybody. And then away tournaments, we would certainly encourage each team to work with your COVID lead, level lead ahead of time to talk about things that go into the away tournaments and ways to make it safe for everybody to still have a fun time and hopefully be able to participate in those types of things. We should really be aware of what's going on in those communities at that time. The COVID level lead could probably help in trying to get some of that data and things like that as well. And then just being aware that, not every family is going to have the same comfort level with some of those things. While everybody is accepting some risk to play hockey, there are extra risks that come with some of those types of things and activities that go with that. So just being aware of what's appropriate for each family. They may have other things to consider, other kids that might be sick or family and things like that, that they have to be a little more careful about. So just being respectful of those things. Next slide. Expectations. So coaches are expected to follow the policies and protocols as related. They're expected to enforce the protocols and policies, or at least work with your COVID team contacts so that somebody with the team is really in charge of trying to enforce some of those things for players, other coaches, and for family. Coaches are expected to work with the safety officers if we have to do some contact tracing, trying to be pretty accessible to that. Coaches are expected to work with the COVID team contact or level lead if there's questions on the policy or other things, and then just continue to try to be creative, finding ways to decrease any risk for players, yourselves, for being exposed, needing to quarantine, and trying to keep kids learning and playing hockey as best we can. Next slide. So I just wanted to run through a couple scenarios to kind of just give you an idea of how we do things when there's a COVID positive case and what we're sort of looking for. So in scenario 1 here, player A becomes symptomatic. The next day they go in to get tested. 2 days later, they get a positive COVID result. They contact us, the COVID safety officer, that day. We reach out to the player. We find out when the symptoms began, when they got tested, any dates that they had interactions with the team starting 48 hours prior to their symptoms or the test date if they were asymptomatic. And then we asked them about close contacts that they recall at the activity. Did they do a lot of drills? Did they feel like they spread out? Did they spend time on the bench? Did they interact closely with anybody off the ice before or after in the locker rooms? Did they carpool? Did they share water bottles or equipment? Do they think they were within those 6 feet with anybody for at least the 15 minutes during that period of time? So we'll go through those things, and then we will get some guidance from the team as well. And then we give them guidance about when they can return, when household contacts can come to Omega Things, and we talk to them about seeing their primary care provider. Next slide. Then we will reach out to the coach, that typically will be the head coach for the team, to inquire about anything that they thought was abnormal, or if they felt everything went as it was sort of supposed to, people were able to kind of do things, or if they had done something that, was a team activity or something like that. So we reach out to the coach, see if there's anything that they had any concerns about. Then we kind of put that all together and we reach out to MDH and we discuss the scenario with them and talk about what they recommend is the best case. Usually they sort of follow what we've sort of determined at that point, whether to quarantine or not, but that's what we work through with them. And then after that, we let the COVID level lead know what the determination was so that they can get out the appropriate communication to the team if it was just an exposure or if people had a higher risk exposure and there may be some people that need to quarantine. So continue. Yep. So in this scenario, the patient told us that they just had one practice the evening before symptoms started, but they had no practice the day before that. The player was unaware of any close contacts during the practice. They felt they socially distanced during and spent no time on the bench. They didn't interact with anyone before the practice. They did not carpool. They didn't share equipment or water bottles. They didn't hang out with anyone from hockey outside of the team event during that infectious period. The coaches also had not witnessed anything that they were worried about and felt kids were socially distanced during the practice. They didn't congregate before or after the practice. And so this was communicated to MDH and no other team members were asked to quarantine other than the players' household contacts. And then the rest of the team was able to continue team activities as usual. MDH, the county does follow up with all positive cases, so they will reach out. Usually though, we are the first ones, just it takes them longer to get around to it. So usually we're the first ones to talk to them, but they do eventually follow up for more formal contact tracing and determination on things. Next slide. So in scenario 2, this one will go a little bit differently. Player A becomes symptomatic. Next day, they go in to get tested. One day later, they get the positive COVID result, and then they contact us again. We contact the positive player family, find out same questions as before. In this scenario, though, player A was at a practice the evening prior to their symptoms, and they recalled doing some drills throughout the practice and being near a couple of players a lot, but they weren't really sure which players it was, and they weren't sure if it was 15 minutes or more, but it could have been. Next slide. So then we contact the coaches and we ask them about any high risk exposures, just like we always would. They're unaware of anything and felt as though players generally were socially distanced. We then explain what kind of the player had commented about, and we ask if the coach can recall what the players did during the practice and how much time was spent doing specific drills. Each other during the coach just kind of tell the drills were throughout the entire practice, the 60 minutes, and couldn't really say who was specifically near who else throughout any portion of the practice, and not really specifically sure if any players would have moved around or not. We then asked the coach, were they any of the players for 15 minutes? They told us no. Next slide. So then we asked the coach at that point, because it's determined that we can't really determine if the kid may have spent more than 15 minutes with another kid and he doesn't know which kid it was. So we asked the coach to postpone any scheduled team activities until we're able to consult with MDH for a little bit more formal guidance. Upon consulting with MDH, we lay out that scenario and they recommend quarantine the entire team since there's a probable chance that someone had a high risk exposure to the positive player. And since we aren't able to narrow it down to who may have been exposed, we must quarantine the entire group for the 14 days. MDH requests a list of all the players in attendance at the practice so that they can formally reach out to them. So this is where the attendance part's pretty important. We then contact the COVID level lead to get a list of all the players in attendance and communicate with them about the need for those players to quarantine. Players aren't allowed to participate in any Omega related events for the 14 days from the date of the exposure, and all are encouraged to contact their primary providers to discuss other restrictions, what truly quarantining means from things, and then testing recommendations for them. And then they should expect a more formal recommendation from MDH, the county, as well at a later date. Next slide. So MDH, the county, follows up with these people, the positive player, for more formal contact tracing. The county sends out more formal communication to those needing to quarantine. In this scenario, we had an accurate attendance. If we did not have the accurate attendance, we would expect families, coaches to try to recall to the best of their ability if they were present. If there's any uncertainty or disagreement, then we just assume they were present and they have to quarantine. Next slide. All right, so finally getting to the end here. So we understand that many of these policy and protocols it's difficult and it requires a lot of persistence. We understand kids are kids. We understand individuals all have different beliefs and understanding as it pertains to COVID. We understand we are all very tired of COVID. It is not realistic to expect 100% compliance, and that's not what we expect. But as close as we can be to that, the day that we have our positive test, hopefully we'll be able to manage through it really well. We just want to be very clear that not following the policies and protocols may result in many individuals needing to be quarantined, people getting sick, not being able to play hockey. We also want to make all attempts we can to keep our players, coaches, and families as safe as possible, with the understanding that hockey is a moderate risk sport as it pertains to COVID, and we cannot eliminate all the risk of exposure nor infection. And then all the guidelines are based on recommendations from the CDC, MDH, Minnesota Hockey. They've been reviewed with Omega's executive committee and have a lot of input from them as well. Questions that you want to raise now, or else you can always reach out to us as well.
That's great. Thanks, guys. So I did get a question, and I want to make sure this is clear too. Since we had the waiting room, we only had 100 people allowed in. We have some people who are missing this. I'm going to be making sure that the slides are available online. I'm hoping that our recording works well, and we can put the recording, and anybody can catch up there as well that missed it or wants to review something again, or maybe even show their team some of the recording. To you guys, is there a place that everybody can find these requirements and things you guys went through on our website right now?
Yep. So the COVID preparedness plan is a really large document. It does live on the Omega website. I believe it's on the top toolbar under COVID, and then there's the COVID preparedness plan on the home page. So it is there. It's very long. So it goes through all of this in excessive detail. This PowerPoint is sort of a snippet of some of the top things that we want for coaches in particular. And we will be attending manager meetings as well to help the managers understand too. So that's not just all on the coaches, but that the managers can help. And then each of you, when the seasons start, we ask you and the managers to meet with the team and to determine who that COVID team contact is going to be pretty quickly, and get that name to Josh and I so that we can connect. And then we will have a meeting with the level leads and each of the team contacts so that they're clear on their roles as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Hey, Andy, just real quick, it's Matt to jump in on, and I got some text here on questions as well and just some actions. I know myself, Chad, and Colin were asked to put together kind of an action plan because we're going to be starting practices as early as this week, right? So we'll probably put a cheat sheet that'll leverage a lot of this for coaches just to have as a tool. One thing that we talked at our exec meeting today, starting with practices, that, ideas like, for example, a whole team can't go into a locker room, right? Especially at Osseo and Maple Grove. But I think we need to give guidance on if you go to another rink, it's just following their guidance of that arena. But if you're at Osseo or Maple Grove, we're going to ask that the coaches don't put a whole team in there for a practice, and that half your team gets ready on chairs and the other half gets ready in the locker room. And I think the rule that we're going to use, if it's an odd day, then the odd numbers go in the locker room. If it's an even day, then the even numbers go into the locker room. So we'll probably put a cheat sheet together for coaches to go to and use. But I don't want to take away from this. That's why I'm being, coaches are kind of lazy, right? So I think we need to help them as much as possible. We'll probably just copy paste a lot what the coach specific stuff that was in this presentation to them so they can go to it even at the rink, right? And just have a little card.
Thanks, Matt. Let me keep going, and we're going to have Chad's kind of come up with a plan, and Chad, I'll just turn it over to you and let you address some of the ideas here.
Sure. And so as the Mueller stated, and first of all, thank you to them, the level leads, and also ultimately here, the team contacts. They're going to have an immense responsibility here this upcoming season, and have already put in countless hours on this. As you heard them say, a couple of keys, right? We need to be creative. We have to understand what that definition of exposure is. And it's being within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes over a 48-hour period. And for most of what we do in hockey and practices and getting in and out of the rink, we should be able to manage that. One place is going to be during games, and in particular, probably tournament weekends. It's going to be very challenging to be able to state that you played, 5 games over a tournament weekend and people on the bench were socially distanced at all times. But one way to think about that here, and this is just one example, and I'm sure people will have better ideas than this, but you may have a team of probably 13 to 17 this year. There's no way you can get more than about 11 in those Maple Grove benches, keeping them all 6 feet apart. It's just mathematically impossible unless you're going to build an upper deck somewhere. So basically what we're putting together here is, just like on the ice or on a football field or anywhere else with pods, you would have bench pods. And, one way to think about this is coaches can be creative. Maybe they have, only 4 players on their team that are competent at playing defense. If you have one of them test positive for COVID after a tournament weekend, if you had a standard bench configuration, you're going to lose all 4 of your defensive players for 2 complete weeks. So this is just one way to think about that. I mean, there's different positions, different skill sets. I'm sure there's many ways you could organize this, but I think really the key takeaway message here is you're going to have to put a little thought into this, and whether it's, how you're going to run your bench during a game, whether it's, how, as Matt just mentioned, who's going to use the locker room on what days, how you're going to go about all these various activities. You just need to give it a little bit of thought, because in the end, when you're having conversations with, the Muellers or the level coordinators, and they're ultimately going to have conversations with the Minnesota Department of Health, who's going to make judgments on what really is going to happen with our players or teams in that situation. The more we are organized and are able to concretely answer, this is who is in close contact. These people, we are confident we're not. The easier those conversations are going to be, the more straightforward that investigation is going to be. And probably the less likely is that your entire team is going to take a 2-week vacation from hockey. Unfortunately, we're going to encounter some issues. In a scenario like this, we're going to have 3-4 individuals perhaps that may need to take a 2-week vacation from hockey. But we see that, I think, as probably a better outcome than having the entire team take off. So again, just be smart. Please follow those guidelines. And do what we can to keep our players on the ice here over the course of the winter and hopefully all the way into next spring.
Hey, Chad, just to piggyback off what you're saying, we talked about the exec meeting, might as well tell the coaches as well. It's not a bad suggestion to tell your parents that maybe carpooling isn't the right thing to do, right? And to minimize those situations. I know as in the presentation, team parties, the ones that we've had or we've dealt with, it seems like the zones that they're at a cabin, they're at a team party and everyone's in the basement, and or someone's at someone's house. Do we get the theme here, right? It's these social gatherings that unfortunately, like, we love to have as part of our community, and like we like to get together. We do put ourselves at risk when we put our team in that position. So this might be a year that we're going to have to pause on those activities and just be smart.
Thank you, guys. That's great. And thank you again to the Muellers for putting all that together. I know you guys have been working really hard, and thanks, Chad and Matt, for your insight and input here. And as we come up with more ideas and better ideas, hopefully we'll be able to share them either through the website or other meetings. And if anybody else comes up with some good ideas for how we can keep this season going as long as possible, that would be great. So Matt, I'm gonna probably tap on you here to help me with this, because Tyler was unable to join us just because Tyler's been taking care of tryouts tonight. So unless Tyler's on, and I don't believe he is, we're gonna tackle this. So off-ice training, of course, is gonna look different this year, right? We were really gearing up to put a big emphasis and get a good off-ice culture going, and we understand that's just not gonna look the same. A couple of things that as an organization we've come up with, and Tyler's talked about, and getting buy-in and getting everybody to really get back to the roots of being a good hockey player away from the rink, is we talked about wanting to have a coach, an off-ice coach or off-ice coordinator, and it doesn't need to be one of your coaching staff, right? It could be a mom or a dad. It could be anybody who is passionate about that and wants to help the kids with the exercise and the off-ice exercise. And I still think we can do that this year. but some of this stuff might need to just be done remotely. And some of the things I'm hearing is, I mean, I appreciate everything that everybody does. Everybody does a lot as a coach. There's a lot of tasks, a lot of requirements, and a lot of things to keep up on. And this year there's going to be more. And the organization of every individual coach is going to really benefit our players. And right here is one of those cases. You know, we may want to, as a team, you may want to come up with these dry land activities almost as a homework type thing, right? So whether guys in the team, girls in the team send a video of them doing their stick handling or their squats and their push-ups and their sit-ups, or you guys do it together on Zoom, or everybody just reports back, or it's just a request and you're requesting the parents to, let's make sure that our kids are doing this, this many puck touches in a week or this many shots. I mean, Matt and others on the team have put out countless videos and programs. So any of that off-ice dry land activity can be done at home until which time we can get back into our facilities and use them. We are working on some of the dry land room usage and when that would be available and how that looks. But you kind of have to stay up on that as we go. Matt, I'm going to probably pass over a bunch here to Josh from N1 here in a minute, but is there something you want to add as far as dryland's at for us right now?
Yeah, so the leadership team kind of changed directions this year, and having Tyler really champion this effort. The theme is to focus on off-ice training and being that athlete. He reached out to a lot of people, Roger and Goose Goslin, and the one thing, that common theme again is that it's that buy-in word. And how do you get everyone to buy into this culture, this dryland culture? And one suggestion, and you guys, coaches can consider it, does it have to be a coach? Maybe it's a mom, maybe it's a dad that doesn't play hockey, but is really enthusiastic about working out. Maybe that could be their role on the team. And it's a new voice, and it's something probably that they're very knowledgeable on. So just think about ideas like that, and that it doesn't have to be someone on the coaching staff. They'll have to do the background check and all that stuff. But, just like a locker room monitor, they have a role as part of the team. But the biggest thing was the buy-in part of it, that they really wanted to make sure that we're into this. And we don't change culture unless we buy into it. And so hopefully we have resources out there that you can go with it. You're going to have to be creative this year, obviously. And that, once we move through this era, we can get back into the rooms, but for now we're gonna have to be creative. I will I can introduce, everyone is familiar with Josh Hutton. It's different from last year. I think velocity is the same, but Josh Hutton will be now representing N1 and used to be formerly BFit. And I'll hand it off to Josh, and he can go on and Josh, we do have also COVID related behaviors at N1 as well. So Josh, you might want to touch on that, but we are going to have a plan for the coaches as well as part of our cheat sheet, so that when we go to N1, we're all on the same page. So I'll hand it off on Josh here.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate all this. It's a really challenging time when we have all this stuff going on. One thing that N1 and BFit formally is we're trying to fall in terms of all standing that COVID regulations are going to have. And we're taking it a step farther to make sure that we're as safe as possible for all the kids. In terms of training, safety, all that stuff goes on. I think it's going to be a very fluid situation. And I think I've talked with Matt and some of the other directors pretty frankly, is making sure that as we go from a week-to-week situation, is we have to be able to adapt and make sure that if something does come up, we're able to address those factors as they come on. But we plan to train as the same as we always have, just with these additional safety guidelines, where we're going to institute 6x6 boxes with upwards to 30 athletes, and making sure that they all stay within their same guidelines, and just be fluid as the weeks go on. Other than that, I think it's just really dependent on how each week goes. If Matt can touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah. So, right. So Be Fit, how should I put this? So if you're a coach last year, you kind of knew the cadence of how we off ice trained and how we used Be Fit and how it was just, hey, we want them to go through the exercises, but really we want the coaches to kind of learn what the activities are. We kind of shuffled the schedule around and there's a larger space. So our teams are going to get basically 12 touches in a professional setting, 6 at BFit or N1 and 5 or 6 at Velocity. And so I feel that, not only, yes, we teach training the coaches on the activities that they're supposed to be doing, but we can really get a workout in, right? And so the Pee-wees and Bantam U12 and U15 teams will be going to N1 6 times. And Josh and team will be, creating the curriculum of what they'll be going through. And so it's different than years past. And then the squirts will only be doing 3, with some potential of increasing that number. But right, our thought on the squirts in U10 were that let's do the 3, kind of just introduce them to that space, and then still let's make sure we utilize our dryland spaces at Osseo and Maple Grove. But obviously that's not the case. So you'll be going to N1 every other week along with Velocity, and that schedule is pretty much set. And it's in conjunction with the skills nights, right? And so that we will be communicating as soon as teams are getting put together. There are some teams that are going once a week, and those teams aren't doing the skills. So it's a little bit of a balance on if you get the skills on the ice from outside sources, then you get reduced numbers at N1. But for the teams that get the skills, they'll just get the N1 experience. So it's a matter of scheduling. And we just made a decision on which teams we're going to put at N1 and which teams we're not going to do that as much. So yeah, that's about it. I guess, Josh, do you want to just touch on some of the curriculum that you guys will be presenting the kids to, and then just, maybe introduce, rock as part of it as well?
Yep. So we will still be instituting some of the same guidelines we have been doing from an on and ice warm up standpoint. The hardest part is that we are running the situation where athletes or teams cannot warm up before games or after games. It is going to present some challenges, but some of the biggest things is making sure these kids understand the basic movements that are needed to be able to be a functional athlete. I did partner with N1 Motion. His name is Rakian Anim. He is a great trainer, and we've been a great partnership so far. And we're looking forward to be able to offer Omega a very great partnership and continue to move along as we have over the past 5 years. Obviously, this year presents a difficult challenge, but I think we have the facility and the ability to make sure that we still offer a very good training partnership that the kids really get a lot out of. So if you guys need anything from us, do just let us know.
Yeah, and Josh, I want to add one thing onto the N1 experience here is that there will be I believe as part of our contract, we have access to the online training.
Yes.
Yes. And so that'll be a very effective tool for potentially coaches working with kids at home and even families for that matter. That library is really good. And I don't know if teams have the ability to set up programs, but there are programs that they could leverage off of that app. And I don't know if that's you or more so Rock that we can reach out to help us with that.
We'll be putting out information on a week-to-week basis where everyone can utilize that information.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Yep.
Josh. Thanks, Matt. One thing I wanted to add to that too is, it's a pretty incredible thing, I think, as an organization that we've been able to financially, put ourselves in a position to offer this to the kids, right? I think it's not something that every organization does. And to get this high level training and a high level introduction to the training for all of our young hockey players, I think is great. So I encourage all and remember, we're talking about, this year and other years in the future, right? This isn't just going to end in this year, but let's make sure we're encouraging our kids. Let's encourage our families. Let's make sure they know that this is a really nice value add to their kids' experience. And, just a chance for them to be better or, more well-rounded athlete, even if it's not just hockey, it's a great experience for all of them. So thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
The other exciting thing, so we have a couple of these partners that really help us out and give these great experiences. This year we've changed who does our goalie providers or who does our goalie training. In the past, we've had two organizations. One of them took the boys' side, one took the girls' side, and we decided that we were going to go with one goalie trainer this year and their team. And we went through a pretty long process, and overwhelmingly, everybody's been really excited to get to work with Justin and Mega Goaltending. So, Justin, if you're on, I will turn it over to you for a couple of minutes just to introduce your program, introduce yourself, and share with us a little bit of what we're in for this year.
Yeah, perfect, Andy. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be on, and excited for this season, getting a chance to work with what is our home association. My oldest son will be a second-year squirt, and my youngest will be a first-year mite this year. So really excited to be able to have a bigger impact and a vested interest in the growth and the development of the goaltenders in the association. And I know that a number of the big buzzwords that have been used and points of emphasis tonight with buy-in and the 5 C's and the culture is all relevant directly to goaltenders as well. And I think that we kind of, through the process of kind of figuring out what direction do we want to go with this change, was that we wanted to be able to address two big areas. One is obviously the physical development of both the boys and the girl goaltenders during the course of the year. And then the second piece was to be able to be a resource for you guys as coaches and try and build a culture that places an emphasis on goaltenders, that shows the goaltenders that you care, and then also that the association provides you as coaches enough resources so that you feel confident in your conversations with the goaltenders. You feel armed with some drills and some capability to help them and work with them. So I'm excited to say that we will have all of that and more for you guys this year and for the kids. And we'll just go quickly just a little bit into our background and then into those details. I grew up playing my youth hockey, high school hockey in Blaine, played a couple years of junior hockey, played 4 years at the University of Minnesota, was fortunate to be a part of their national championship teams out of college. I started coaching 3 years at St. Cloud State with their boys, men's goalies, and then 8 seasons with University of Minnesota men's program, 3 seasons during that time as well with U of M women's program. And I think it's safe to say that one of the things we're most proud of out of our group at Mega is the depth and the quality of the coaching staff that we have. And so this year, the 2 male point persons for the association that you guys will get to see a lot and be working with is Carl Popper, who's the University of Minnesota men's and women's goalie coach. And then Kent Patterson, who is former All-American and pro, and also the Waterloo Blackhawks goalie coach. So right off the bat, you guys are going to have a very high-end coaches working with the kids. We will also, Nora Ratu is on our staff. She is in Russia right now playing for a month, and she'll be back. So the girls will get a chance to work with her, as well as Maddie Rooney, Nicole Likens, and a number of other former female goaltenders as well. So one of the big changes this year is that the boys and girls will be training together in the clinics. So we'll be with them for 10 sessions, and then we'll be with you guys for your in practices for 4 sessions. So 14 touches throughout the year, which is a lot. But it's also important that you guys see those touches as time for you to interact with us as coaches and be able to, and we'll pursue it. We'll seek you guys out to have conversation about how are things going with your goaltenders? How are they giving up goals? How's the season been going? Any areas you want us to address or work on? And our coaches are, they want to work. They don't take well to being wallflowers during practices. So we don't like pushing pucks just to push pucks. So use us and we will seek out to be utilized. So, and I know that big, concern in the past or some kind of hiccups in the past has been communication about those in practices and when we're coming out and what we're going to work on when we come out. And I can tell you we've put a lot of hours into those conversations, and I think you guys will be pleased with how we will be communicating with you and alerting you that we'll be out in most cases weeks in advance and with follow-up reminders. So I feel like this year, a big intention behind it is for us to over communicate that we'll be out and working with the kids. So the second piece around that, I guess, that I think is important is, we're going to do a lot of work at the house level this year as well, and trying to attract kids to the position, try and break down some of the myths and barriers for parents so that they let their kids be goaltenders if they want to, so that as that kind of filters up to the traveling level, that you as coaches will have more kids to work with. Once they get to that point, we have a saying that attention equals retention. So if you're giving the goaltenders attention, and that can be as big as a development plan and practice plans, and it can be as little as checking in and seeing how their day was and how school's going and what else they like to do outside of the rink. But goalies, just as Blashill said, and are the same as forwards. They want to know that their coach cares. They want to know that their coach cares about them because, just because they have all the equipment on and the helmet on and the strange stick and all that kind of stuff doesn't mean they're not a kid underneath there. And they want to be valued and appreciated and have someone looking out for them. And we want to help make that be a possibility for you guys. I know that it can be an intimidating process. You don't want to mess them up. You don't want to mess with something they've been told. But we really want to kind of break down that barrier and let you know that even saying something that might be quote unquote wrong is better, because at least it shows that you're trying to make an effort, and the kids will appreciate that. I can honestly tell you they'll appreciate that. And so our task these coming years here will be to give you guys resources so that you can feel confident in interacting with the kids and giving that attention. And for us, from a measuring stick perspective, I want to see multiple goalies at the C-bottom level. I want to see multiple goalies at the junior gold level, that kids stay with the position because they love it. They've had great support from their coaching staff, a great culture to be a part of, and they're willing to play, even if it's not at a high level for them, but they're able to continue to play later into their years and stick with the association. And that to me is a measure of success. That, as well as being very competitive as the season comes to state tournaments and districts. There's no why goaltenders aren't at the top of the district and for each team and each level. And so that's a mission that we'll have as well for you guys.
Good deal, Justin. Thank you so much. One thing that I hear this about goalies is, it seems like a lot of goalies get in the camp of they work with one organization in the summertime and they kind of stick with that and they stick with that style. It's really important for us to have all of our kids, all of our goalies, regardless if they train with you in the summer, they train with one of the other organizations. One of the things I think that I really noticed when you gave our presentation, when we were going through the process, was that you talked about the fact it didn't matter what style you had and who you trained with. You guys didn't try and change somebody. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here to develop athletes and to develop strong fundamentals. And we feel like if we can develop the athleticism in the individual and strong fundamentals, then they will have the tools and the skill set to play whichever way they like. So if they like to play aggressive, they're going to have the footwork, the capability, the mindset to be able to do so. If they tend to be a little bit more passive, a little bit more blocking, then we're going to make sure that they have the technique to be able to do that as well. So we're not a cookie cutter organization. You will not be able to pick out who a mega goalie is, right, versus another goalie because of a style, because we have a variety of coaches, a variety of coaching background, and we want to make sure that the kid is well equipped to play the way that they want to play.
That's great. Thank you. And this is
Andy, just real quick, just
Yep.
Matt jumping in on as well. And we've talked with Justin a little bit, and we're really excited about this new change. But with this change, I think it provides an opportunity to maybe do something different and good. And so just for the coaches' knowledge, we have these practice consults, and we are brainstorming ideas on how we're going to structure or model these practice consults. But I think just so you guys are aware, my hope is that we have a all coaches meeting. Obviously, every team does have a goalie coach. Head coaches are welcome to join. But at that point, we'd like to present what we would like to have for the structure at a practice when we know the goalie coach is going to be there, if everyone understands what I mean. So more to come, but once we get teams formed, it'll free up some time for us to finalize that plan, and then we'll meet as an entire group to kind of talk through that plan so that we're all on the same page when we start executing these practices.
Perfect. Just to add one more thing here, guys, too. We'll be sending out some information around, logging in and getting access to a bunch of webinars and ebooks and all kinds more content than you guys, need, frankly. But in the end, at the end of the day, email us, and we will, if you have an issue with your U12 because she's getting beat 5-hole and you're trying to figure it out for some drills, we will send you videos of drills to work with your goaltenders. And for all intents and purposes, we are co-coaches with you guys this year for how many touches that we're with you guys, and for that amount of the access through technology that we have nowadays. We can coach right alongside you guys throughout the season. And so we're excited to do so.
That's great. Thank you. So talking about that and talking about the tools, I mean, Justin let us right in perfectly with the tools they have to offer. And I know we've been meeting for a while, so we're going to try and keep it short and brief for everybody. I appreciate everybody sticking with us here. But looking at some of the Omega coaching tools, we have a lot of things that we can work with. First and foremost that I'm going to jump into, and Matt, you feel free to interrupt me whenever you'd like. Hockey Share is a big one, right? This is something that, each team will have an account on Hockey Share. I'm not going to go out there right now as I was thinking about and show everybody how to get there. But if you go out to hockeyshare.com, and you should get some information on this, I believe, from your level directors, you're going to have an account, and you can go out there and you can put together your practice plan. And the beautiful thing about it is there's drills for the association. Our association is great. There's so many drills out there. I've always found certain guys I latch onto and I like their drills, and I go out and I steal their drills and I pull them into my plans. I'll have one plan. Sometimes I update just a couple of plans. But this is a great tool, a great resource. And I think this year it's going to be even more important, as we need to make sure that we're prepared every day. And I know everybody has a different style in coaching, and that's just fine, whatever that is. But I think every one of us stepping up our level of preparing for the practice is going to be important. Because as I heard it from our COVID team, is when you think about it, one of the things I hadn't really even thought about as much is, you're not going to have a post-game regroup. You're not going to, to talk with your players as much. You're not going to have as much time before the game to draw stuff up. And I always went over my kind of, 5 basic things or 4 basic things every game with my team. It's just going to make that much more, make it that much more important to go through these things and have really effective, efficient practices when you're with your kids. Next, our next tool or resource is, the Omega website is just full of different resources. I encourage everybody to get out there. I had somebody actually, some of the questions I've been getting via text. One of the questions earlier was about where they find the coach registration list. So whenever you guys are done with this call, if you're curious about that, you go to the coach registration page. You just click on coach registration. Right near the top, you're going to see a PDF. That PDF includes every coach who's registered to this point. Deanna, I believe, updates that once a week, maybe even more as we get closer. And every coach is listed there with what they've done and what they need to do, right there on the coach registration page. So there is a lot on our website. There's a lot of skill videos. There's different drills. You'll probably find some practice plans there. And again, for anybody coming out of U8s and Supermites, don't be afraid to use some of your plans. And there were great plans. There's always modifications. There's always new things you can put in, but there's some really great stuff that's been put in there. We don't need to recreate the wheel. Let's keep going with it. We have our YouTube channel. This is where we house, there's a whole lot of great stuff out there. That's kind of where we house our hockey habit videos as well. Matt's found out that Instagram is a great place for skill videos and drills. So we do have an Omega Instagram page, if that's what it's called. And we encourage everybody to follow it. And Matt will constantly update that with new things. Anything you want to add to that, Matt?
No, that's good. I mean,
Okay. Huddle.
brave enough to join Instagram. That's about it, right?
Yeah. But there's good stuff, and it's not just, from you, Matt. I've even, and you and I have talked, right? I've sent you a couple things, and even guys I played with back in the day that run organizations or camps, and it is a really good place to capture some of the stuff and get what you want really quickly. Huddle is our video provider, and you have to talk with your level director if that's something that you're interested in. We used to provide it for all the teams, but it was a fairly large cost, and we realized that it wasn't getting utilized enough. If that is something that you want and need, like I said, please reach out to your level director with your team. Got the house handbook. We got drills and games and do's and don'ts, a lot of the stuff that we already know. And then for some of the coaches coming from the house part, you aren't familiar with it, and the travel coaches for the most part should be, is we do a little bit of a hockey habit communication. We send out some hockey habits that we think are important, that we want everybody to work on, and then we try and send at least a little bit of context around it, and then a video of that drill being executed, or a drill that you can use to get your players a little more proficient with it. Matt's done a really great job on kind of breaking down those habits into different categories and keeping it very, very simple. So even somebody who doesn't know as much about hockey, you could focus on one of these areas and improve your individual players.
Their ability to know the game and read the game and have the context. And, I think we sometimes struggle at the youth level and even probably American Hockey League, NCAA, about knowing the game and knowing that context. How would you build some of those drills that you're doing with your players that might not know, kind of their lines that they need to be taken, or the right part of the game? Does that make sense?
It does. I would say the one misconception is that because players play in the NHL, they all have hockey sense, or they all have. And the reality is, it's all relative, but they don't. We have players that just like when I watch my 9-year-old son's team, some players are quicker to learn than others. Some players are smarter than others. So I think it's the same, honestly, at any level. And it still comes back to, I would say, reps of those fundamentals. To me, if you rep it out, and when you rep it out, you got to do it right. Like I always say, you're either coaching them to do it right or you're coaching them to do it wrong. So if you have any drill, let's say, for example, so really important to us that when we come back into our zone, that our wingers are coming back through the dot line. You're not coming down the walls. If you're doing any drill where you're forcing your guys to come down the walls, then you're actually teaching them to do it wrong. And I'm super, super sensitive to that. I try never to do any drill that teaches players to do it wrong. If you want your guys to stop at the net in a game, then make them stop at the net in practice. If you want your guys to have great breakout habits of shoulder checks in a game, then make them do it in practice. And you rep it out over and over and over. And you're not teaching hockey sense per se in those drills, but you're drilling great habits, and ultimately guys with great habits appear to have hockey sense. Now the other thing is, one of the games that I didn't show in here that we're going to do next year, and we're in a period of R&D. These I got this from Babs, R&D. So I've been on the phone with a whole bunch of different NHL coaches, and it's rob and do. You rob from other people and then you do it yourself, and that's the reality of it. So I've got a game called Barcelona that I'm gonna steal from the Rangers coaching staff that I talked to them about, and it's basically a 3-on-3 game when the nets are around the blue lines in the neutral zone, but they use the red line like it used to be used as offsides. So you have to really work back and support the puck in attack, and they play 3-on-3 or 4-on-4, and it's a lot of close support type scenarios. But when you use those small games, you do help create better hockey sense. As I said off the start, the game's super fluid. You can't tell people where to stand, but if you give them the mentality of support, just the mentality of the puck is gold and close support, if they have those two mentalities, they'll do it.
So they're all.
Okay, I'll plug back in. So great stuff. I think it speaks to a lot of things we do. The small games, the touches, the repetitions, and kind of trying to build that habit and build that hockey IQ that we hear so much about. So a few things that we're going to try and be doing throughout the year so that we can continue to build on this. We do this meeting every year. We're going to be having some monthly Zoom calls with level directors. We do our coaching clinics throughout the year. Just a chance for us to go through, potentially some new games, get everybody together, go through some different skills, some things that we haven't had a chance to do. We really hope and encourage that everybody attends those whenever possible. We're going to have our goalie coach meetings, right? So we're going to get the goalie coaches together to go through things. Some of it may be Zoom, all of it might be Zoom for that matter. And then one of the things that I think is really great, another thing that the organization has put together is the weekly skills clinics led by somebody in the skills team. And so for some of the newer coaches coming up from U10 from U8s and Supermites, this will be a night of the week where you're going to have one of the individuals from the skills team come out and lead a focused drill or practice that's going to work on a certain concept, right? We might have a body checking or body contact night. We may have more of a kind of a scoring skills type night. It might be more of a skating night. And the curriculum's set up and the drills have been thought out and it works really well. And I think it's also an opportunity for the coaches to, not just take the night off, but to take a little bit of a step back so they can watch somebody else lead a practice, see their tendencies, see how the kids respond. And hopefully just like, he was saying there is rob and do, like, take something from what you're seeing from that skills team and incorporate it with your team as the year goes on. One thing that I wanted to make sure we add to the agenda this year was the Scholastic Achievement and the 11 characteristics or traits for Jacob. It's a program that probably got, we got a little bit of response last year, but we're looking for more participation. And we need this from the coaches and the assistant coaches, right? So we have a Scholastic Achievement Award and any of the kids that get a 3.0 or better, we need parent submission. So we need to be, made aware of it from the parents, and all this info is out there on the website. So please go take a look. Christina Campa, Bridget Erickson run it. And I believe there might be one other individual. So forgive me for not remembering. But get out there and take a look at what the requirements are. Some of the kids love this, right? You're not always going to have the superstar hockey player. Let's make sure they're getting the awards and the accolades where they can. And then one team member is nominated from each team for the 11 for Jacob. And as you can see, these traits listed, right? Be fair, be kind, be understanding, be honest, be thankful, be a good sport, be a good friend, be generous, be joyful, be gentle, be positive. So you're going to pick one team member, and this will be a collaborative effort from the head coach and assistant coaches on who best represents these traits. And then you nominate that person as well. And I know last year, Christina had even shared some stories on kids that, weren't the best player on the team, but just great individuals, and how excited they were to have got this award, to hear their name mentioned. So let's do our part to help make that work with all the time everybody's putting in and the effort and the great kids we have in our association. I'll leave a little space here if Matt wants to add something else, but I really want to thank everybody for being a part of this meeting and being a part of everything that we do. It's a great thing, and it's what makes our organization successful. So thanks again to everybody. I did forget one slide, and so even before I pass off to Matt, I did want to add one thing, and I was on one of the earlier slides, but I didn't dedicate a slide to it, and it's just talking about coach selection and the process that we go through to make sure that we have coaches in place at every spot. We have some picked already for some of the teams that are being placed right now or that are in tryouts right now. We have a lot of other spots that we need to fill, especially on the head coach's side. We never have enough head coaches signed up for the amount of head coaches we need for our teams. if you're interested and you think you have the capability, the time commitment, please let me know. Please reach out to me. Put your hand in the air. And here's one thing I promise everybody is we don't move. If you say you want to coach and I need you have an A player and I need a coach at the B2 and you said you'd coach, I'm never going to move your player around, because of that. So your player's not going to be hurt because of the fact that you want to be a head coach. So anybody who's interested, please let me know. Please reach out, and we'll go from there. But again, thank you to everybody. Thanks for joining this call. Thanks for your work and effort. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to all the different resources we gave. And then I'd say, Matt, is there anything that you wanted to add here at the end?
No, I think we've said enough tonight, right? We spent out a lot of information was sent out, so hopefully you guys took good notes and just take a couple things away from this presentation. Never hesitate to reach out and ask questions or give us some questions. One thing we didn't touch on is the monthly talks that the level directors will have with each of the coaches. It's part of that collaborative effort. We'll yeah, that's about it. So thank you for everyone coaching and the rink. That's all I got.
Have a good night, everybody.